Welcome, everyone, to the Meaningful Hearts Podcast, where we discuss the everyday questions that make us or break us if we let them. With your hosts, Drew and Daniela. Take our hands and let's walk this journey together. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode. And today we're going to talk about childhood trauma and how it affected us as children going into adulthood. I have a special guest today, as well as my beautiful co-host, Daniela. Say hello, Daniela.
Hello.
She's still shy after like 35 episodes. So we're going to get into it and talk about some childhood trauma with a guest. His name is James. James, say hello.
Hey, what's up, guys?
James is going to talk about his experiences growing up in a broken home and how that affected him as a child and how he's dealing with it and working towards healing as an adult. So I want to know a little bit about you. James, where are you from? Like, what's your story? Like, let's get the ball rolling. What is it like to be James?
Well, it definitely started when I was, very young. Obviously, I didn't really know what was going on. And we're talking about 1-2 years old. Living in Puerto Rico, don't know too much about it, but from my mom's history and everything that she's talked about, it was a physically abusive relationship. And I can only imagine in some sort of hostile environment what that does to a child and how they respond to that later on in life. And little did I know how it did affect me as I grew up. But from Puerto Rico, we moved to New York. And skipping a little bit of a timeline here, my mom meets this guy. And they end up getting married, but we moved in with him prior to that. And, everybody's always nice when you first meet them until you start really seeing their true colors. And one of the things that we realized after they got married is that the person that she did get married to the second time, he just wasn't good to us anymore. He was very verbally abusive, very possessive of my mom. And a lot of the times, I wouldn't be able to walk around the house without shoes. If I didn't have any shoes on, he would, and I'm talking about, I'm 4 or 5 years old walking around without shoes on. He pushes me, and he's a big dude. He pushes me, steps on my feet, pushes me into the gate. I fall over. If I'm taking too long of a shower, he would hit me across my face. And sometimes he'd had rings on his fingers. And my mom put him in his place, but it didn't stop him from doing things behind her back when she wasn't home, and he was home early a lot of the times. So those are kind of some of the brief areas of what kind of trauma that I dealt with as a child.
Okay, let's paint the picture. So basically, you weren't with your biological father. Right. You don't know much about him. You moved to New York. Shortly after your mother's single. It was just you, or do you have any other siblings?
Yeah, I have an older brother. His name is Vincent. Okay. He's 2 years older than me.
Okay, so you and your brother and your mom, single mother, and then she meets a gentleman, and shortly after moved in together. You guys are all living under the same household. Pretty intense at a very young age. That's pretty intense. So right off the bat, bad. Your mom's still entertaining this guy, even though she's got to put him in his place, and he's being a little hostile towards her children. How did that make you feel? I guess when was the earliest memory of you actually feeling that way?
I think I can actually date all my feelings. Every single one of them. When it comes to traumatic experiences, and this may not be for everybody, but for me, I was able to tie a memory to it just because of how I was feeling in that moment. And obviously it was fear, right? Every time I was around him, I would be scared. And I guess what the way that I would respond to that would be leaving the immediate area. It's kind of how my mom coped with it. She was like, go downstairs or go inside your room, go play games or go do this, go do that. And, just to kind of to be out of the picture, because sure, he wasn't that smart or anything like that, but there was something against my brother and myself that he had to always pick on us. And I didn't understand it. I could never understand it because I wouldn't do that as a person. But just picking on a little child or a kid anytime they're around because they're not doing what you asked them to do, or because, when you asked them to do it, they didn't do it the way that you envisioned it to be. So you throw a fit. Like, that's really traumatic to a child, growing up, it's all about self-expression, trying to find yourself. And that's what we need to allow kids to do. And I don't think I was allowed that as a child. And I had to learn that growing older, which was even more tough because you're withheld from creating bonds and relationships with a lot of people.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think that Danielle and I, both coming from childhood trauma ourselves and being survivors of that, can definitely agree. We've all had our own experiences. Daniela, some professional input.
I've been sitting here like, wow, it makes me want to hug James's inner child, just to think about some of the just think about some of the experiences that you've been through, and even conversations that I've had with Drew about just childhood experiences where there are pretty traumatic things that happen, and you're talking about like 4 or 5 years old having to follow certain rules that you don't even understand, that you don't understand how to internalize things either. You're a kid, right? You said it yourself. When we're kids, it's the time for self-expression. It's the time when we discover who we are, not in the sense of like our per se, like our identity per se, because we're always working on that, but just who we are as a human being. We're curious, we want to play, we have an imagination. And it sounds like in your experience, you weren't really allowed to have that form of expression and even develop a sense of trust, because your parents are the ones that are supposed to protect you. And it doesn't sound like that was necessarily the case for you, like with your mom. I was also thinking about, just in talking about trauma in general and broken homes, I think a lot of people think that a broken home is only a divorced household. But I think, especially after hearing all of that, I think the three of us all come from broken homes. I mean, my parents were divorced and that was certainly broken, but I know that Drew's parents were together and that was an unhealthy home. And then James, for you, your mom remarried and even that was an unhealthy home. And sometimes parents think that, by staying together or by finding a stable partner that leads to good, and it actually sometimes ends up doing more harm than anything else. So that was what I was thinking about this whole time. And also, like I said, just wanting to like hug your inner child because you didn't get a chance to be a kid. The other thing that I also thought about as you were speaking is, you sound like you have a lot of self-awareness now as an adult. It makes me wonder about, at what point in your life did you realize that you had a traumatic childhood? And what was that like? What was it like coming to that realization that, man, like, my mom didn't protect me in the way that, a mom is supposed to, or she didn't teach me the right skills, or even towards, the man that she married. At what point did you become aware of how your childhood had affected your life?
Well, I'll be honest. It probably took after my 20s, or not after my 20s, I should say during my 20s. Because in my teens, trying to develop relationships, one of the only things that I was looking for was love. And I felt like that was absent. Not that my mom didn't love me. I won't discredit her. She gave me all the love that she could possibly give someone. but there was still something missing. So I was trying to find it in somebody else, and I didn't get that. But up until I met my wife, she kind of brought that out of me, and we've had discussions about things that she went through. And then I started telling her all the stuff that I went through. I was like, wow, like I've been through a lot. Like, and then I asked myself, like, what the next question is like, well, if I've been through a lot, now I've acknowledged it. Well, what am I doing about it? And now that was the hardest question, because a lot of people, they either don't know about it or they do know about it, but they're not doing anything about it. And I think that was one of the biggest transitions for me in my 20s, mid 20s, that I realized my house was broken. A lot of the stuff that I was exposed to in that relationship with my mom and her ex-husband, you know, that there was a lot of resentment to her for exposing me to that environment for so long. And I mean, even to this day, I still feel resentful, but I can't blame her. You know what I mean? Like, I really can't blame her. What she wanted was, you know, a full family, right? Mom, dad, and 2 kids, or whatever, how many kids you have. She wanted that for us. And, you know, who knew, you know, the guy was nice to us at the start, you know, like everybody's always nice on the surface until you get really deep down inside of them. And you realize that this guy is just a pile of shit. But yeah, it took up into my mid 20s to realize that I had a traumatic experience as a child, and been working on it ever since I did realize it. And it's been stressful. It's hard. It's very difficult.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, you know, your parents try to fill a void. They're trying to do the best they can. And in doing so, solving their own problems and realizing their own problems, their own issues that they had, it ultimately affects you because you're along for the ride, right? They're trying to get it right, and they're trying to also be a parent. So you have all these things going on, and there's needs, right? I'm sure companionship is a big one. So instead of just, you know, instead of being, you know, I guess being alone for a while, like you come across somebody you think is a good fit, and like, whoa, you know, just out of curiosity, was the man that your mother ended up bringing into the household, was he a parent before you guys?
Yeah, actually, he was. He had 2 kids in a previous marriage.
Okay, and any they're older, are they older, younger, or the same age?
Yeah, they I think they were about maybe about 10 plus years older than my brother and I.
And how is that relationship? How is his relationship with his children?
Absent.
His biological
really.
children.
I mean, yeah, I think it's absent. There's no relationship at all. He doesn't talk to his son, and you know what, that didn't like stop. It kind of stopped after my mom left him, where he didn't talk to his son anymore. But right now, I mean, he's living in the basement of his daughter's home because his daughter has a good heart and she doesn't have the right mind to like let him go and rot away, because that's essentially what he's doing.
Of course, of course. So what were your coping mechanisms growing up, right? You know, you're talking about pretty much your whole childhood to your teens, right? I think you pretty much lived with this man. So what were your coping mechanisms? Like, what did you do? What were like maybe some constructive ones, and what were some destructive ones?
Most of my time I spent playing games. It was the biggest outlet for me. It was the biggest up and coming thing between the 80s and the 90s for kids to, you know, play games, right? And being able to escape in another room of the house to do something that I found enjoyable was one of the more positive outcomes of it, because where all that nasty stuff in the background was happening, you know, my face is glued to the TV and engrossed in a game or story of a game. But though most of my days I spent downstairs in the basement, just playing games until I moved stuff into my room, and then it just became my room where I did that as well. But I wouldn't come out of my room. I wouldn't I'd come out to eat dinner, and even that was a struggle. Cause I mean, he didn't allow us to talk or anything like that. But yeah, it was video games for me. Going outside, going outside is probably the best medicine. Being outside, you know, granted, you can't, as a kid, you can't really go too far, but just being outside, hearing, you know, the birds chirp and the wind blowing like that, you don't think about it, but that does something to somebody. It definitely does some sort of healing. And those are the two main things that I would do to kind of escape that reality.
Okay. I mean, that's listen, I think anything out of that household, you know, even playing in traffic sounds like more entertaining than dealing with that guy, right? So
Yeah.
my question is, were there any, as you got older and you became a little more, you know, like maybe later teens, was there any destructive behavior? You know, I got the hobbies and playing video games. Very, you know, there's so many different types of genres of games that you can identify with and vicariously live through that gets you there. But were there any destructive behaviors, things that you did that weren't so savory, that put you in some really bad spots? And
In other words, how angry were you?
were you teen angst, anger? Yeah. What did that look like?
It was pretty bad. It was pretty
How many?
freaking bad.
What did the walls look like in your home? I'm just curious, or in your room?
Dude, honestly, literally all white. All white, and like if I had an accomplishment or participation award, it'd be up there on the wall just to know, like, oh yeah, I was there and I did something. No, it was terrible. I could not self-express. Like I was so like sheltered, and my mom was like, no, I don't want anything on the walls or nothing like that. Like you would think a kid like me would have you know, things like Slipknot on the wall and maybe some like nudes or girls in bikinis or something like that. I'd have that, but no, I couldn't even do that. It had to be all white walls, academic achievements, sports accomplishments. That's it. Very bland.
So it's pretty much an expression of what they deemed or your mother deemed expression versus you being you know, being able to do it yourself, right? It's like, oh yeah, express yourself
absolutely.
in a way that I want you to express yourself. I want you to be, yeah. That kind of sucks. So you're pretty much constipated. You can't.
Yep.
That's an interesting word choice.
Yeah, I mean, you're stifled. Your creativity is stifled. Self-discovery, you can't even discover. You can't even try, right?
Right.
So where did that push you? Like, what direction did that push you in?
Yeah, I basically lost myself. I couldn't self-identify with any group. And when I did self-identify, or when I did get involved with a group, it'd be a group of people that really don't see themselves going anywhere, or they were troublemakers, and you know, drinking before the age of 21 happened, you know, smoking, anything that you can think of, like I was involved with. And I really didn't, I mean, maybe not that far, but you know, there were incidences in high school.
Hold on.
Yeah, maybe not. Let's not go that far. Maybe I've done some bad shit. Don't get me wrong.
Listen, we don't need places and times specifically, but like, listen, we all have done knucklehead things, and whether you indulge in drugs or petty crimes, I'm sure, you know, you're a teenager. You're expressing yourself outside of the home, and we've all done stupid things, and
yeah,
nobody's perfect on this show, so don't worry about that filter. That's dealing with us for the past 60 plus episodes. They already understand that there's no filter. Just so you know.
All right, well,
you're safe here.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the reassurance. So I definitely have gotten into some trouble with the law, mainly even before I graduated high school. Incidences where I was caught handling a deadly weapon and actually threatening somebody because of an argument. And other times I'd be drinking alcohol in school, being drunk as fuck, literally just filling up a water bottle with vodka, acting like it's water, and drinking it throughout the entire day of high school. It got to a point where I was expelled. I got expelled in 9th grade, and I was given another chance. So they accepted me back into the school because they knew my mom. My mom was very friendly to everybody, so she was good on that part. But yeah, so getting in trouble with the law, they fingerprinted me, they checked my records, shit like that. when I started driving, DUIs, going out to clubs, binge drinking. And you would think normally like, oh yeah, no, that's normal. Like, no, I mean, I dated a girl who was like 23 and I was only 17, 18. And I mean, she took me out to bars because she knew the bouncers. So I went out drinking, binge drinking at like 18. And I know that's not the most exciting thing, but that's what I do. I escape reality by going out, staying out late at night, and not like avoiding being inside the house. That was like the main goal. And I found myself in a lot of shit because of it.
So at what point do you feel that it was like a turning point for you? It's like, well, I need to change and I need to become. I need to really become something else because this is not going to be healthy for me. At what point did you realize that?
When I started seeing relationships like fluctuate, and everybody says people come and go, friends come and leave, you know, I get that. Same thing with women, if you're a guy, and vice versa, if you're a girl, dudes, or whatever else, whatever you're into. People I have to say it now. I mean, but yes. but to put it clear, like I think people in general were changing around me, and the vibes were different. I think it was until I started broke those conversations with someone else, when I actually had a discussion with someone else. And I mean, I am talking about my wife, and I'm not saying you can go out there, find your significant other that you're going to marry and talk to them. No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that I had somebody who cared about me enough to sit down, talk to me about and relate, you know, like what she went through, and talk to me about what I went through. When I realized how my relationship with that person was being negatively impacted because I haven't healed my previous trauma, that meant the world to me. Because like this person stepped out on, you know, out of her own busy schedule to talk to somebody that she has no idea who they are, and give that time, that respect. And I know there was some sort of, you know, interest in each other, you know, we were dating or whatever, but the fact that there was one person, that all it takes is one person to really give a shit about you, talk to that person, share those things with them. If that's somebody you can't talk to, find somebody else that you can talk to. Go to church, find a pastor. They're really good at listening. You know, any family member that you know that maybe went through similar things, it's very uplifting to hear somebody else talk from that perspective. And I think that's kind of what you wanted this episode to be about, is really to just hone in on, you know, the shit that does happen out there to us individually, how it affects us, and you know, how do we get better? And one of those things is talking about it. You don't talk about it, then it'll always stay in your lockbox, and then it'll come out when you don't want it to.
That was deep. That was real deep. I definitely agree to how we start to realize the things that we've experienced in our lives is when we find ourselves in situations that bring that out, whether it's a person or a triggering event. Knowing how to talk about it afterward, after you've become aware of it, is very important. So I really like that you said that.
Yeah, I think also self-disclosure, you know, and self-discovery are a way of healing, right? And taking care of your past traumas, like, is very important to move forward. If you hold all these burdens in, you're never going to be able to become the person that somebody else can love. But also, I think having somebody recognize and see you the way you wanted to be seen and understand you and listen, I think was the biggest thing. Nobody ever listened to you, right?
Yeah.
Your mom didn't listen to you. She directed you. I know what's best for you, right?
Yep.
And she thought she did. And like I said, I'm sure it came from a good place, right? She gave you the love that she thought that you needed. But in reality, all you needed was somebody that would listen to you, right? And let you take direction in your own life. And I think that was it's a tragedy, because there's a lot of bad moments could have been avoided if she would have just listened. It's so hard to listen, right? It's so hard to do it. I struggle with it sometimes. I know I have answers, but sometimes I'm not supposed to give the answers. I'm supposed to listen. It's very hard to listen and be there. And I think for all listeners out there that have struggled or still struggling, I'm sure it's because you don't have anybody that can listen to you or hear you out. And this is why we have James on disclosing and talking about his life, because in essence, we want you to understand there are other people out there that are also going through this. We're on journeys. James, I don't know if you want to disclose how old you are.
I'm 33 years old and still trying to figure it out.
Exactly. 33, trying to figure it out. I'm 39, still trying to figure it out. I'm work in progress. Daniela, 18.
29.
Yeah. We're still working through our traumas, but understanding that you do have trauma and you're working towards it. That's it. Yeah. You're working through it now.
Yeah, I would say that one of the biggest things that I've realized is that trauma, there's this conception that trauma is like either natural disasters or like sexual assault or physical assault. But just in my experiences, both personally and professionally, is that trauma is just something that causes you, and it's something that is significantly distressing enough where it affects your ability to either emotionally regulate, even function, or act accordingly. So trauma means different things. I actually just recently became aware of myself of, the traumatic experiences that I've been through with my own mom and what that was like. And even though the thing that sucks the most, and I think that what we're not allowed to feel, is that our parents are flawed. I come across this time and time again where I do in the work that I do with people, as I start to explore their relationships with their parents, innately we all have this thing of like, we're supposed to be grateful for our parents because they gave us our needs. But through conversation and through exploration, we start to realize that just because our parents met our basic needs, like, James, with your mom having a father figure or having like a stable household, Drew, same thing with you, having parents that were together in a home. And then ultimately realizing that just because they gave you these basic needs, it doesn't mean that they met your emotional needs. It could actually go the complete opposite. And that even that is considered traumatic. So for people listening, understanding that whatever you consider trauma to be, if that's your trauma, not allowing, because we compare ourselves sometimes to like, oh, people, somebody has it worse. Like there are people who are really in like abusive households, but even abuse means different things, and kind of normalizing the idea that trauma is different for everybody, but it doesn't make your trauma, James, any less significant than my trauma or even Drew's trauma. It's all different. And realizing these things, that it actually helps bring us together, ironically enough, because if none of us had been through those things, we might not have been sitting here being able to share our stories and, help people feel related. I definitely rambled. I do that sometimes.
One more thing I would like to add is that our parents think that if they can't understand what's going on with you, or you don't understand what happened with me, so you're a kid, you just be a kid. Like, worry about being a kid. That was my biggest problem, right? Worry about being a kid. And it's like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, what are you going to say, right? And then at the same time, as a child, you're like, well, maybe I don't know any better. Maybe this is just growing up, and maybe what they went through was so much worse. And you live with that for a while until you start to grow up, you get older, and you start to realize that was bullshit. That was complete and utter bullshit. And it invalidates what I'm feeling. And I used to feel guilty for feeling the way that I did. And it's like, and it's, oh, you don't know what it's like to walk uphill and uphill home and uphill to school every day with no shoes. It was always a story. It was always something to trump what you were talking about. There was always something better, bigger and better and worse. It was like the tragedy Olympics. And unfortunately, it's just what parents do, because they don't know what to say. They're like, oh shit, my child's having issues. I was a kid once. No, it's not a big deal. That's exactly what my parents told me. So I'll just tell you that. It's like, what? It's pretty, there's no manual, I guess, for parenting, but there is books and there's knowledge out there to make
sure.
you a better parent. And
Yeah.
which segues into, James, I believe you have a blessing in your life now, correct?
Yeah,
and,
yeah. I'm
your
a
wife's
dad
wife?
of a beautiful daughter. 3 months now, so very happy.
Congratulations.
Thank you, dude. And hopefully I can fix myself before she realizes it. That's the plan here.
So being a parent now and planning for the future, what kind of things have you learned as a youth growing up and having traumas that maybe you can implement into your parenting style, to maybe mitigate these issues? Listen, trauma happens. Sometimes you can't control it, but what issues could you mitigate, I guess, or implement to maybe help your daughter's upbringing and going forward?
I think, and it will sound weird at first when it hits you, but trying to understand their feelings. I think
that doesn't sound weird.
I
that actually made a lot of sense.
Okay, so I'm glad it did, but I think for some people they'll think like, well, not trying to understand what they're feeling. Isn't that the whole thing? You're trying to understand how they feel, so this way you can, give them the solution. Well, no, it's not about the solution. It's about the journey to a solution. And Drew, we spoke about the journey not too long ago, but it is about the journey. And when we talked about that, it clicked. I'm like, man, that literally is about, you can implement it in everything. And I think that's one of the biggest things. It's like, I want to let her self-express. If she's writing on the walls, I'm not going to go crazy about it. If I got to pay the rent house, I'll pay whatever I got to pay to the landowner. I'll be like, you know what, just keep my deposit. I don't care. I want her to be able to express herself. And, in a constructive way, be like, you know what, I really like what you did here, but next time let's do it on paper. Because that's how we do things. We're going to do things on paper and not on the walls. And this way, she's like, okay. And then maybe the next time she'll do it on paper. Maybe she'll do it on the wall again. But to me as a parent, the hardest thing, and I'm still dealing with it, is to keep your composure. That is like paramount. Like a baby, for example, doesn't know how to talk. They're crying. You can't see what's happening internally to them. Maybe they're experiencing discomfort, but they can't express it to you. They know how to cry about it. And sometimes it's like high pitched. It's constant. Like yesterday, holding her for 2 hours while she was constantly crying, didn't know what it was. She was tired. She didn't want the next bottle, even though she was hungry. She was tired over being hungry. And I think the best thing to do is not try to understand what's going on, but helping them understand it, helping them identify how they feel. Don't try to understand it. Let them identify it. Because when you try to understand something for someone, then they can't think. They can't think for themselves. And if you're thinking for somebody throughout their life, it's like the whole story with teaching a person how to fish, or fish for a man for a day, he'll eat for a day, or teach him how to fish and he'll eat for a lifetime. It's the same story, same deal, same concept.
Yeah, I think that's huge. That's paramount. Like, you need to learn how to think for yourself. And I think, yes, you're raised to not think for yourself. You're told, I'll do the thinking for you. You don't know shit. I was raised with that mentality. I mean, I was told that, my grandmother told me that, what I've forgotten you haven't learned yet. Like, you don't know anything. Like, yeah. But that's horse shit. That's all a lie. But in reality, like, teach your kid to be bulletproof. Teach your kid to ask questions. Teach your kid to want to know more and want to stand up for themselves. You want to build a strong-minded person, not an asshole, but a strong-minded person that can actually question things. When you go to school or somebody on the street puts you in a predicament and you're like, no, I ain't getting involved in that. I'm not, my mom didn't raise no fool, right? That's the expression. But in reality, you have to be self-sufficient, but it has to be taught and it has to be nurtured. And that's beautiful that you're implementing these things with your daughter. And listen, is it going to be perfect? No, you're going to get frustrated. You're like, what the fuck happened in the walls? It's going to happen. Yeah. Maybe your wife's going to be the lighthearted one at that point, and vice versa. But learning and being intentional about managing your emotions is going to be the biggest thing. and that is going to be huge for the future. And I know that with the intention and care, you will get there, and that's all you can do. Daniela, you wanna vibe off on this?
I actually saw what James was talking about on, I think it was like a post on social media the other day where this mom, her daughter had written on the mirror, and the mom, excuse me, was talking about how she didn't yell at her daughter. She didn't, ground her. She didn't punish her. But what she did do was compliment, like, this is really great, but now let's clean it up and set some boundaries. And that's exactly, it's pretty coincidental how James is talking about it, because that's exactly what you do. You don't deny the form of self-expression. You just redirect it elsewhere, and you're instinctively teaching boundaries and what that looks like. I listened to sometime within like the last couple months, there was a podcast, Tony Robbins podcast, where he was talking about how to be a father. And I think something that he said really resonated with me. And I think that if our parents had applied these things, and if we, as current parents or maybe future parents apply this as well, it can make a really big difference. He said that the biggest mistake that parents make is teaching kids how to be like them instead of teaching kids how to be kids. Like our parents raised us in their image versus in the image that we are. And I think applying that really can make a lot of changes, because you're not raising a mini you, you're raising a person to be their own individual. That was what I related.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you've already existed. You are existing. You've existed for X years, and you will have X years to live. You've already done it. Why are you trying to repeat history? I mean, that's all we ever do as humanity. We repeat history, and that's huge to just imprint on your child. I mean, before they can even become what they're supposed to be.
Yeah, and you want to get an upgraded version. You don't want the same version, right? So maybe it's a derivative of you and the good qualities you have, but you want your child to take that, be creative with it, and become their own person. And also, when you guys were both talking about writing on the wall, and then you could yell at your child for not doing that, and you stifle their creativity, and now they're attaching that moment with doing that activity wherever they do it. Now it's going to be in their heads, right? Imprinted there. So yes, reframing it so that your kid will continue that good thing minus the bad thing that they were doing with it, and understand, hey, this is setting boundaries. I think that's amazing. That I wish that my parents talked to me like that. I wish, because there were so many things that I wanted to do that I'd have to fight to want to do certain things, but I felt so bad wanting to do these things. And then there are things I just didn't do because, I had a bad experience, and that was it for me. I felt ashamed. That I used to attach it to feeling ashamed. Whether it's video games or whatever it is, these are not bad things. It's a beautiful world out there. There's so much we're supposed to discover. We're supposed to try different things and see what we like and see what we don't like, within reason. But that's the new generation. That's the next generation. This is the type of parenting that needs to happen in order for that change to happen. I'm going to end it there. James, I appreciate you for coming on the show and sharing your story and sharing your insight, because we've learned a lot too from having you on the show. Thank you.
No, thanks for having me, bro. It's definitely a pleasure to be here and be able to share those stories with you guys, and vice versa, hearing from you guys as well.
Yeah, thank you. I also want to add, just for listeners as well, is that, yes, absolutely. Thank you, James. Also, I commend you for allowing yourself to be vulnerable, because you're speaking about it in a pretty open space. And the reason why I say that is because what I would want listeners to take away is kind of exactly what you were saying, to talk about, what has happened, what they've experienced, and know that, self-disclosure and vulnerability, it actually has a really fantastic way of bringing people together, much like we are together right now. So I wanted to finish with that as well.
Yes, helps us all bond. Well, thank you everyone for listening. We appreciate you all, and thank my co-host Daniela and our guest James. Thank you very much. Bye.